Good morning, everyone. I guess this is not what you turned up for, but anyway, that's life. So, over the last 3 months, it's been 3 months, I guess, yeah. The hottest topic in the country has been demonetization, or notebandi as it has more popularly came to be known as. I just wanted to sort of start off this with a very simple question. 3 months down the line, how do you see it?
Okay. So, thank you very much, Vivek, for this question. And my reaction to your question and this session is exactly the reaction I had on 8th of November at 8 p.m. It was a sudden bombshell which nobody knew, and it was launched by Prime Minister Modi. And similarly, 5 minutes ago, there was a sudden bombshell which was launched both to Vivek and me in terms of, this is a new session and this is what you're going to be talking about, go ahead on stage. So I think the topic is very apt because we didn't have time to react then, we don't have time to react today. So back to your question, Vivek, in terms of how it has panned out, I think the jury will be out. It will take time for the jury to be out. But India by itself, as people, all of us are, what shall I say, cash-centric. Everybody, every time you go out of the house, you always feel comfortable when you have a little bit of cash in your pocket. My father, who is 70 plus, has credit cards, has everything. He always says, no, Meghdoot, give me some money. I said, why do you need money? He said, नहीं, जेब में कुछ पैसा होगा तो अच्छा लगता है. So, this as a reaction is what I have to what has happened 3 months ago. And now today, a lot of people, even though they have moved digital, they are moving back into the cash economy, and this is what my initial opinion is. But my counter question to you.
I just wanted to add. In fact, before demonetization happened, I used to carry very little cash. But after demonetization, I make sure that at any point of time, I have at least, 5,000 rupees in my pocket and at least another 5,000 at home. Because, we just don't know what is about to hit us. So this is another, sort of unintended consequence of demonetization. I was perfectly fine with the digital system as it was. But given the fact as to what happened, this is how I reacted to it. So, yeah. Sorry.
Excellent. And that is what a lot of people have moved into. I also know of people who have, I have seen Facebook posts saying that going to Chandigarh with 100 rupees in my pocket, don't know what to do. And they have survived. I don't think they died. I don't think they went hungry. They have survived. So from that perspective, I think some people have adjusted. But my counter question to you, Vivek, in this is, and there are reports out, we will come to know in time whether it's successful or not. It's been an unprecedented step in the global economy. Maybe there has been something about 100 years ago, but nothing in the very recent past as such. How bold a step do you think it is?
Okay. This is a question I get asked often. Before I answer that question, I just wanted to give you a data point because we were talking about cash. So if you look at debit card, usage, or rather debit card withdrawals, using a debit card to withdraw money from an ATM, it's gone up close to 75% between December and January. So again, that's one data point that you need to look at. This is the data point which tells you that Indians are obsessed with cash. And the entire idea of trying to move the economy towards a digital economy and pushing it and trying to do it in a very short period of time is essentially a very stupid one. And as far as the boldness of the move is concerned, so this is a question I've been thinking about for the last 3.5 months. And the best answer to this question has come from a stand-up comic called Varun Grover, who also happens to be a Hindi film lyricist and a scriptwriter. So Varun's, in one of his videos, essentially gave the example of a king. In the olden days, we used to have kings, and so he basically said it in Hindi, and what he said was that, पुराने ज़माने में राजे महाराजे होते थे, तो राजा साहब एक दिन उठते थे और उनको ख्याल आता था कि आज कबूतर की बर्फी खानी है. So, for those who do not understand Hindi, it basically means that one day, the king used to get up and, tell his courtiers that I want to have, a sweet made out of pigeons. And the entire, the courtiers used to get into action in order to try to fulfill this need of the king. So I look at demonetization in precisely the same way. I don't think it has been thought through at all. It was just a brainwave someone had, and the Prime Minister bought it, and he made a decision. But the question is, can you make such a big decision, without any data, without any precedents? I mean, there are countries which resort to demonetization are countries like Venezuela, where the economy is essentially on the brink of collapse. I mean, Indian economy is not collapsing, by any stretch of imagination. Despite the fact that our GDP data is not the best one going around, I mean, we still are growing at a very fast rate. We may or may not be the fastest growing economy in the world, but we are growing. There is no doubt about that. What I have, no one's been able to explain to me is why did we need it in the first place? And what was the thought behind it? Because I don't see any thought anywhere. And questions have been asked, RTIs have been filed. I mean, recently there was an RTI, very, very simple question was asked to the finance minister. Was he aware of this decision, before it was made? And he did not respond to it. So why are we, I mean, these are simple questions. How is it a matter of national security if Arun Jaitley, comes on record to say, yes, I knew about it, or yes, I did not know about it? So, yeah. So that's my long, answer to your very short question.
So let me pose a few counters to that. And before I say anything, let me say I'm neither favoring demonetization nor not favoring demonetization. Simply because there are multiple thoughts in my mind. Some thoughts say it was good, some thoughts say it was bad, and whether we are right or wrong, only time will tell. So one of the first thought, Vivek, that comes in my mind is the timing couldn't have been better. In terms of an economy which is growing at 7.5%, projected to grow at 8%, no better time to apply a speed breaker than this. I mean, if you want to do monetization, I think this was the best time. Second one is whether it was a right move. That's a separate story altogether. And as a country, as an economy, we are highly, I shall say, non-compliant. Non-compliance runs in our blood. And I distinctly remember this conversation, these beautiful days post 8th of November when you are standing in bank queues to withdraw money because ATMs have run dry. So what my bank had done, it had set up a shamyana where we were sitting. And there was this one lady who was frantically on the telephone, and she did not, and this is in Bombay, so we are not in a deprived city where money is not available. And she was trying to call all her relatives, saying that, what, can you please withdraw some money for me? And I was saying, why? I was thinking, I just overheard the conversation. While I was pretending to look at my mobile, my ears were focused on her conversation. Now she had some interior designing work to be done. And for that, the contractor had to pay some 5 lakhs or 8 lakhs. And I was thinking, why can't she give a check? It's as simple as that. It's not a small fellow. The point is, contractor said that if you give me a check, I'm going to charge you some 15% extra service tax. So which means now a 5 lakh bill suddenly goes to 5,75,000. And she's not willing to pay that 75,000. So as a country, we are predominantly non-compliant.
And with cash driven.
And which is why it makes it cash driven. And so that is one of the logics, so that you move a lot of activities from a cash economy to a digital economy. A lot of things will come into surveillance, will get tracked, and accordingly our tax compliance will start becoming better.
Okay. So these are two different, compliance and black money are two different issues. Okay. The original aim of demonetization, if you read the 3-page note that accompanied the Prime Minister's speech at 8 p.m. on November 8th, was to tackle black money and was to tackle counterfeit notes. Now, as far as counterfeit notes go, the Reserve Bank of India has said that of the notes that were submitted back to banks, 0.19% were counterfeit notes, which basically means 0.19% is basically zero. Doesn't mean anything. The second point goes as far as tackling black money goes. Now, there is enough research and there is enough evidence, and by evidence I mean evidence with the Income Tax Department, which suggests that when they go on a raid, okay, and this is evidence over a period of 5-6 years, when they go on a raid to sort of, get hold of black money on which tax has not been paid, normally, cash is only 5 to 6% of what is recovered, okay? So, ultimately the point is, if 6% of black money is in the form of cash, then you don't, make the whole country run around for a period of 2 months and, stand in lines and make the entire, basically everybody, in a way, put them in an inconvenient spot because 6% of the cash is in the form of black money, number one point. The second point is, a lot of black money gets generated in real estate transactions. Now, a very good way of tracking this is to bring real estate under the goods and services tax, which hasn't happened at all. The third point as far as cash goes is, and this is a very interesting point which nothing has been done about, and I've been talking about it for almost 6-7 months before demonetization happened, in fact, is the fact that political parties can take donations in cash, okay, of up to 20,000 rupees, and they don't need to declare who is the person giving them that donation, okay. Now, that Mr. Jaitley in this budget has proposed to reduce that to 2,000 rupees. Now, the point is, if 2,000 or 20,000, it doesn't matter because, earlier, if it was 20,000, one receipt would be needed. If it is 2,000, 10 receipts would be needed. Ultimately, you still don't have to declare who is the guy donating money to all these political parties. So, if reform has to happen, political parties are better placed at ensuring that money is paid, rather donations are made to them in the form of check, Paytm, a Bheem app, or whatever. I mean, you have UPI. So there are so many other things that can be done to ensure that, more and more of the nation goes digital. Instead of, having done what was done. So I'm not against the economy going digital, but at the same time, you cannot force, this digital thing down the throats of people, which is what is happening now. So, if you, right now we have data only up to January, and that suggests that people are going back to cash. Over a period of time, I guess by the time we have April end data, it will be very clear as to has the digital push of the government borne any fruits, or have people gone back to cash. As of now, it looks like people are going back to cash, but the evidence is not conclusive enough.
Gentlemen, I'd just like to interrupt for a minute. We have our third panelist, Ms. Aanchal Arora. I request Ms. Arora to please join us on stage. Hi. The first session in the morning, we're discussing demonetization. How does it feel to be here? Literature, finance, confusing? Do you see a harmony? Okay.
Not really.
Not really? So, Dr. Amit Kapoor couldn't be here with us, but we have Dr. Vivek Kaul, and of course...
I'm not a doctor.
But we have him, and he's been a journalist since, decades, since I think half of the audience wasn't even born since the time he's been practicing this. So he has come out with a very spectacular and, almost like a sizzling announcement of Notebandi 2.0. So he, according to Mr. Kaul, he believes that Notebandi is coming all over again. And it's not just coming for your cash, it's also coming for your assets. And he's got a theory behind it. So we'd probably want Dr. Kaul to speak, Mr. Kaul to speak a little about that.
Okay, so basically, when the finance minister presented the budget, one of the things he did not talk about, and which was there in, if you read the finance bill, was the fact that, one of the sections in the Income Tax Act is to be amended. Okay, now I don't remember the particular section, I think it was section
132.
132, right. So as per that amendment, an income tax officer, before he initiates an inquiry against a taxpayer, has to offer some valid reasons as to why is he initiating an inquiry. But if that amendment goes through, the income tax officer need not offer any reasons as to why is he initiating an inquiry. So essentially, an income tax officer has unparalleled power to go after taxpayers. Now, which, as if anyone knows how the income tax system in this country works, is not a very healthy option. So I think that specific change has been proposed primarily because the government wants to go after other assets as well. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that remains debatable. But I have a problem with income tax officers having, unparalleled, unquestioned power, basically. So more than Notebandi, that is the basic issue here, Aanchal.
So, that reminds me of SEBI. So that's a market regulator that we have, and it's the same role. It just gets a little, the kind of powers that we give to the market regulators, it's kind of necessary. So that's like a food for thought for all of you, that, it's also necessary that you go after these people so that the frauds and scams, etc., everything is curbed. But at the same time, you also have to ensure that, capitalism, as we know, is there in full swing.
The basic question is who regulates the regulator?
Yeah.
So you don't, give unparalleled powers to the regulator because there is no one to regulate the regulator. So
if I have to just add, prior to this amendment, there is a clear provision which says that if an income tax department has to raid a premises or carry what they call technically as search and seizure activities under section 133 of the Income Tax Act, they have to have very specific information and proof, not necessarily proof, but very specific information on the premise on which they have carried out the search and seizure. Now today, if this goes away, are we moving back to what shall I say, 1977 emergency Raj? No? And all along you have a lot of people who compare Narendra Modi to the Indira Gandhi of the BJP. Are we coming back to that? And should a regulator, however handicapped he is or however powerful he or she is, be given such wide powers? Can these be used for harassing a common man? Can these be used for, harassing political adversaries? And in a democracy, I think this is something which is extremely unhealthy.
in fact, the sad part is that there has been barely any discussion around this, except for one editorial written by a member of parliament called J. Panda, who belongs to the Biju Janata Dal. There was an editorial in the Times of India. So, and given the way our parliament operates, I won't be surprised if the Lok Sabha just passes this. I mean, because nobody really, they don't discuss the finance bill. I mean, it typically tends to get passed on the last day of the budget session any which ways. So.
And speaking of the finance bill, you all have heard of the controversy that's going on in DU right now, right? Chair speaking, thumping around Jamjas College, etc. Every time, each time there's some bill that has to be passed, it gets enshrouded by all this controversy that allegedly is created to sort of, to divert your attention. So as thinking rational creatures, we should always be cognizant of what's been passed. The finance bill is a very, very controversial bill with some very, very controversial points. So, we shouldn't get diverted by the gossips or, whatever the anti-national and the national discourses, the superfluous discourses that go around, I'd say. But to take the discussion forward, so we've had a healthy one on demonetization. I would want to move now to GDP and what the quarter 3 results. So what do the GDP results indicate about the government? Is it fair, the parameters that they've used? Because there's been a lot of controversy about that. I don't know how many of you are aware of about the parameters, but I'd want Mr. Kaul to speak a little about that.
So, okay, no, this is a very, how do I answer it? I mean, it's not a very straightforward question to answer. I mean, GDP essentially, as you would know, is a measure of the size of any economy. And it's a theoretical construct. So, as per the the Central Statistical Organization, the Indian GDP grew by 7% between October and December 2016. So, which basically means that there was virtually no impact of demonetization. And this becomes, a little difficult to believe because, 98% of consumer transactions in India happen in the form of cash, or at least used to happen in the form of cash until demonetization happened. Now, what happens when you take cash out of the market? If you take cash out of the market, transactions come to a standstill, unless, people use other forms of money. I mean, that can be, credit cards, Paytm, so on and so forth. But obviously, this cannot happen overnight. When 98% of consumer transactions are happening in the form of cash, you cannot, suddenly move to zero. I mean, you'd probably move to, 80%, 85% or whatever. So there was no cash. So when there was no cash in the economy, transactions did not happen. When transactions did not happen, businesses had no business. When businesses had no business, they did not make any money. When they did not make any money, ultimately, how did the economy grow by 7%? I mean, that's a very basic question that needs to be asked. The second thing that has been suggested is that, a lot of people are going around, and I mean, this includes some famous economists, a lot of international press has suggested that the Indian GDP data is fudged, like the Chinese data is. Now, the problem with that argument, at least I have a problem with that argument, is that nobody has been able to offer any evidence for the same. I mean, you can assume that the data is not reflecting the correct economic scenario, but saying that it is fudged is an entirely different thing. So, that's the long answer to your question. I don't think that, the economic growth of 7% reflects the current economic scenario, but at the same time, I think the data, there is no evidence that the data is fudged. So basically, there is somewhere down the line, there is a problem with the way we are measuring economic growth. And the problem lies in the fact that, basically the economy, if you were to divide it in a very simplistic sort of way, has something known as a formal sector and something known as an informal sector. A formal sector is essentially something where, the government can measure the size of that sector and can tax it accordingly. The informal sector is something, which exists, but, the government has very little role to play in it. And the GDP, ultimately, when it is calculated, does not capture the informal sector data very, very well. And given that fact, that the informal sector has basically been affected a lot more than the formal sector, you sort of come to the explanation as to why the 7% economic growth number is really incorrect. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it makes logical sense. We all know the aftermath of demonetization. Businesses were hit across sectors. And with that, you growth, if I'm not mistaken, it was the highest since 2010-11, the figure that we got?
No, what was the high, basically so again, I mean, to simplify what she's trying to ask, one way of measuring the GDP is, essentially adding the four components of private consumption, government consumption, investments, plus net exports. Net exports is essentially imports minus exports. So if you look at the consumer expenditure part of it, which forms around 55 to 60% of the GDP, that grew by close to 10%, which was the second fastest in the last 5 years. Now, which is very difficult to believe. When the consumer doesn't have money, how will he spend, right? And the other argument is that he can always borrow and spend. But if you look at the borrowing data also, the retail loans grew by 0.5% during that period. So obviously all banks were essentially busy in handling the aftermath of demonetization. Basically everybody was busy counting money. So they were not lending any loans. So again, so that brings us back to the basic fact that, how could private consumer expenditure grow by 10% in an environment where there was no cash in the economy. So, yeah.
So first of all, before I talk about it, long ago when I was starting my career, my father told me one very interesting statement. He says, there is lies, there are white lies, and then there is statistics. What it basically means is give a large set of data to anybody, any good analytics guy, and he can massage it well enough to make it look the way you want it to. And this applies across the analytics people. And the more hard you look at the data, more you can make it twist and turn you want it to. When they say something like, if somebody wants to find out the cost of a product, you give him or her the data to 20 people and they'll come out with 25 different costs. And all of them are right and all of them are wrong. Back here, I had this very interesting insight, sir, from a friend of mine who works for a logistics company. So I was asking him, how has demonetization hit you? He says, business is band. Band, he said, stopped. I said, what does that mean? Does that mean things are not getting sold? And then, how come now, 3 months later, you have this 7% GDP growth? So what he said was very interesting. He said, this demonetization happened post-Diwali. So a whole lot of your consumer shipments happened pre-Diwali. What it means is, in Diwali, if somebody is buying 10 units, the manufacturer would shift 15 units to the dealer and put pressure on the dealer, becho, in order to show heavier growth. Now, when this happened, you suddenly had a whole lot of inventory which was lying with the dealers and which in turn would go to the end consumers. So your manufacturers actually manufacturing and shipping out data has become extremely low. But the way it is calculated is more in terms of consumption. So your actual sales would have happened in the normal circumstances without resulting to excess borrowing, etc. But you look at a logistics company and you look at their numbers in terms of how many shipments they have shipped, what are their revenues, and this is a big hunch, and I'm sure those numbers are down. Now going ahead, what will happen, as both me and Vivek talked in the beginning, saying that we are going back to becoming a cash economy. I think there will be some hit in the first quarter, but second quarter onwards things could be business as usual, because cash is going to be restored back into the system, everything is going to start growing. Maybe not as much business as usual, but it's going to come back to normalcy, and which is going to paint the government in a great way, saying that there is absolutely no impact of demonetization.
I think we'll have to sum up here. So we've had a good discussion on GDP as well as demonetization. I'll quickly open it up to the audience for a couple of questions if we can take. Yes, sir. Could anybody hand over the mic to him, please? Yeah, that's good.
Hi, my name is Deepak Himani. I'm a financial advisor, so I would like to, have that first. So you were talking on data and analytics and numbers. I would like to quote a CIO of a mutual fund. He said, statistics are like a bikini. They show you what you want to see, but hide what is most important.
Can I stop you there? Actually, the CIO of the mutual fund, whoever he was, did not tell you that this was basically a line which he copied from an American marketing professor called Aaron Levinstein.
Exactly. Now since you are here and we spoke about demonetization and GDP figures. All of us agree that GDP figures, you said you can't prove they are fudged, but there is something which is not matching. I would just like to take it a little further, not on GDP, but on GST, which is coming. First of all, do you think it will actually happen on the day they are saying?
I don't buy that.
Okay, why I'm saying is this. There is hard fact which shows that wherever GST has been introduced in the world, that government has never got re-elected back again. It's a fact.
In fact, what happens is initially when GST is implemented, you get, prices go up.
Yes,
And
the
which
first
will-
2 years are very painful.
Yeah, and prices go up, and also there is no clear conclusive evidence as to whether introduction of GDP ultimately leads to higher economic growth. There are countries where it has led to higher economic growth, and there are countries where nothing really has happened. So, yes, I mean, so you are right in what you are basically trying to say. So.
Thank you. So any other questions that we can take? Nothing from the students? No GDP, no problems on demonetization, nothing? Okay. Thank you so much, both of you, for the session.
I would like to just end by, given it's a lit fest, we talk too much finance. Let me talk a little bit about movies. I'll just end with a song which I always use in my training sessions. It's an old movie, Rajesh Khanna, Zeenat Aman, I think, Chhela Babu. So the heroine asks the hero कि बोल दिलदार तुझे कैसा चाहिए, प्यार चाहिए कि पैसा चाहिए. The hero replies, he obviously wants to have the girl, so he says, पैसा क्या करना है? इस पैसा क्या करना है? प्यार में जीना है, प्यार में मरना है. He says, यार दिलदार तेरे जैसा चाहिए, प्यार के लिए मगर पैसा चाहिए.
Thank you very much, panelists. May I now request Mr. Ashok Patel to hand over mementos to our panelists. Thank you, panelists.